Right, are you ready to ask your questions? Anyone brave enough to share? You don't have to, but we would like you to share them with us. Okay, and so we're going to ask you to leave them on the tables because we'd like to collect them. Yeah, go for it. We'd like to hear. Okay, let's listen.
So the scenario we have is where you have, thanks. The scenario we have is where you have, what is the word, negative or weak culture. And then in that scenario, the question we would pose to the leadership or the senior management would be, what is your expected cost of failure for food safety culture? And do you think your employees are happy with the culture that you have?
Yeah, what do your employees think of your culture? Esther made a point about, the need for us to work for an ethical and moral company. Now, it's quite interesting. I don't think we've done a lot of research on it in South Africa, but there has been a lot of research done in the US with companies affected by food safety situations. And what happens is staff want to leave. They don't want to say at family Christmases, I work for Chipotle. Okay. Because then you know that no one else is going to, they're only going to talk about what Chipotle has been doing to their customers for the rest of the family Christmas dinner. And you work there? So it's quite important. What do you think the staff think? And then when we do the assessment, we actually ask the staff, what do you think? And then you put the two together. Because remember the disconnects that Vota mentioned. We think it's all good in the ivory tower. Meanwhile, down there, it's rotten. And they don't agree with what we're saying. We've got this disconnect in the organization. Anyone else? Another question you'd like? Yeah, go for it.
I just wanted to say, in terms of training, our staff, I think in general in the food industry, there is a lack in terms of show me. I think it was June who was referring a lot to show me, because when we do training, we have these slides that are, that we put out there, and we hardly show what the impact is. So I think it's very important that we rather facilitate rather than just train, because then we show how it will affect or the consequences, right?
Right. So if you take Frank Janus's advice, okay, so Frank Janus would advise that associates teach associates. Okay, so now as a food safety manager, just digest that one. You don't do the training, but staff train each other. Okay, so the best person to train on food safety is somebody that is closest to that and has a good understanding. So what you're saying. So in Walmart, that's exactly what they do. They have associates teaching other associates, not just the food safety manager doing the training. Another practical tip. Okay, the death by PowerPoint for sure. Okay, but the death by PowerPoint and statistics. Okay. So what do? I mean, you saw it even in some of the presentations that we've seen today. How many people are going to die, from foodborne illness? And yeah, 40,000 people a year die, and we know these numbers, but does it move us? It doesn't. But knowing and show me. So here's this person, and here's a picture, and this. Talk to that person and maybe interview someone who has suffered from foodborne illness, and actually have that interview as part of training. Not numbers, because numbers don't move us. We know that people die on our roads every day. We do. Okay, we know that over Christmas time, it's like 1,500 people that die, on the roads. Does that change the way we drive? But let it be your family member. Let it be your family member. And then all of a sudden our attitude towards road safety changes quite considerably when you've had that very close experience, with the problem. So bear that in mind. The training point is very good. I specifically wanted to ask Blaine, but he answered the question, when do they allow their staff to go for training? Because I have done a bit of training in my life, and I have had people that have worked the whole night and then have to stay on to do, a 4-hour training shift. And it's like, by 10 o'clock, it's like, okay, guys, you must go home and sleep now, because I'm getting nowhere, and you're not hearing anything, okay? And I see some nodding heads, so I can see you relating to this, okay? Come on. Who are we kidding? Who are we kidding? If we do not take the time and invest in our people's training, their knowledge, their inherent knowledge, and we don't show them that we respect their knowledge and we provide them with appropriate training, how do we ever expect them to take food safety seriously? Because they know by having to work a double shift, you don't take it seriously. Why? Because you're trying to cut costs. You don't want them to actually have a whole day when they're off, because then you'll have to pay for someone to cover their shift. So you think I think sometimes we underestimate the intelligence of our employees in terms of maths and figuring out the costs. Okay, I really think that we must be careful there. Okay, some other examples of questions? Right, let's move to the next case study then. So on your table, you have a scenario. Okay, so there's 5 different scenarios that are out there where you're faced with a company or a situation where it is possibly a less than ideal food safety culture. And you can see that there's a problem. I want to know from you as a group, so what are we going to do about it? Now, I want you to remember 12 dots now, not 9 dots, okay? Because 9 dots is what you would have done anyway. Final written warning. No. We just learnt. We spent the whole day learning that that's not the right way to do it. Okay. So using some of our newly acquired knowledge, how could we tackle the problem? It might be an old problem, but can we think of a new solution given the information that we've had today? Have a look at your scenario, put your brains together, 5 minutes, and then we'll have some answers. Right, I'd like to have some ideas. Scenario number 1 was the family-owned business, frozen meals. Not really too interested. They've been running their business quite successfully for a long time, and now they would have been approached by a major retailer. They want you to do a quick fix. Just go buy HACCP. We need HACCP. Go buy HACCP. Just put some documents together quickly. We've got a meeting next Wednesday. Any ideas? Which group had the scenario? Right, Andre, go for it. How are we going to convince this crowd?
So from our side, what we have put together is we would encourage the business owners to be open and honest about the status of their current system and what they have in place. And then also get to understand exactly what the customer requires, compare with what they have in place, and from the gaps they should agree on the timelines within which they can put in place or rather develop and implement all the requirements.
Okay. Right, so I like the fact that we're open and honest. Let's rather just call a spade a spade. Okay, in terms of what we heard from Chris gave us a very interesting tool to use. Food safety is a moral issue. Okay, so the whole thing about I've heard this a lot. Yeah, but we haven't killed anyone yet. Okay, or that you know of. Okay, but really it's a moral issue. So although it's a commercial issue, it's a moral issue, and I really think we need to get away from blaming the retailers for everything. And we need to say we're doing this because it's the right thing to do. Like Blaine said, as a company, we should be going further than this. This is not just about minimum standards. I like the honest and openness. I think for you as a quality manager, it's very important. Remember what McLeod said about she was the fall guy at the end of the day in some of those scenarios. So that paper trail is quite important. Okay, next group. Looking at the, I think we had a scenario where we've got, the audit cleanup. How do we get out of the audit cleanup mode, people? Come on, you guys had it. Have an unannounced audit. What do you think, Michelle?
I think one needs to plan the year ahead and split up what actually needs to be done. And the owners have to buy in. They have to realize the state of whatever it is, whether it be equipment or temperatures, chilling facilities and that. And so they have to undertake, the owners have to undertake to commit to spreading out the cost.
Right. So, one of the things that I would do as a consultant in my consulting days is let's do the budget and sign off the budget before we start the project, because that way I know we're not going to land up in a situation where there's no money. First, know how much it's going to cost, and then we'll decide whether we're going to do it. Because sometimes we can't do it all. That's just the reality. Then we can prioritize. But if we go into something, absolutely. At least you've got intent. At least you have intent, and you know what you've got to work with. I'd rather again have open and honest. Okay, right. The audit cleanup. So FSSC has helped us. Yes, right. Because now we will have unannounced audits. You know this, eh? If you didn't read that. Okay. Right, I was with a company this week who said to me they volunteered for 2 out of 3. You only have to have 1. They said no. They want 2 out of 3 audits to be unannounced. Kudos to them. Kudos to them. It will be very interesting to see what happens to your audit score. You'll tell me, eh? What happens to your audit score? What happens to your audit performance at your unannounced audit? Because we all have this situation. I think the problem is if senior management put too much focus on the audit outcome for the external audit. If you're only measuring the health of your food safety system on your external audit score or your external audit performance, you know nothing. Even with a good auditor and all the cleanup, how much are you hiding? You talk about all the things you got away with when we leave the audit. Those are the problems that you really should be addressing. You need to get out of that. Do not condone the conduct. Now be careful as food safety managers. If you're the one who's saying, listen, you better clean up your department, and have you checked this, and you're condoning it. You are tacitly approving it. So be very careful in that respect. Any other ideas as to how you've gotten out of this bad habit?
We've implemented a food safety indicator program. So we don't just measure whether something is in place or not, we measure how well it's managed on an ongoing basis, and it's externally done. So if I can't do it for my departments, then they do it interdepartmentally. So they're measuring each other.
Cool.
And so it's an ongoing score, and that score goes to the CEO.
Cool beans. That sounds excellent. I was with a company the other day, and they showed me their audit results, and they were very unhappy because they dropped 10% because of the new audit criteria, and they were very unhappy. And we were talking about what the most significant risks are in the business. And the most significant risks happen to be the old facilities. Now, we all suffer from this. You know, our food factories were built 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. And now you're trying to comply with new requirements in a 100-year-old factory. I looked at the audit score. 89, 95. Gee, this is really great. Where does it show me on there that you need a new facility? Okay, now think about this, people. If senior management sees those audit scores and they're above 85%, but there are serious problems in your facility, you are not doing them any favors by showing them that information. Does that make sense? Okay, because if I'm looking at it as the risk committee and I'm looking at 95%, 85%, we don't need to spend any money on facilities. You're doing so well anyway. What do you mean you want money for new extraction? You want 90% in your audit. And then we get frustrated. There's no commitment with senior management. No, you're not giving them the right information. You're not showing them where the problems actually are. So think about this. We don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but sometimes your own audit results don't help you. I think that sort of ongoing measurement is much more accurate. Much more accurate. Okay. Right. Anyone implemented a catch someone doing something right program? Ever thought of it? Okay. Right. So instead of going out to do an internal audit to find people doing the wrong things, why don't you, for today, just focus on the right things? Take a camera, make a big deal about it. Put the pictures in the canteen. Catch people doing things right. Because we want to encourage the belonging. Do you remember what we spoke about earlier? Rob mentioned the fact that inherently we want to belong. It it happened at school. We wanted to be the cool kids. And if we weren't the cool kids, we were the uncool kids. Okay? But we wanted to belong somewhere. So what if we create a cool kids club and we catch people doing things right and we make a big deal about the fact that they're doing it right? We reward them with a cold drink. We reward them with the chocolate. We let them go home an hour earlier. Nothing significant in terms of cost, but the ripple effect within the business can be significant. Try it. You never know. It might actually work. Now, in terms of the other scenario where we have the regulators. So what advice could we give the regulators in terms of how they could go about doing this? If you were the regulators, who had that scenario? There we go. Najib, come on. You've been wanting to do this the whole year. No, I didn't know it was random.
So
the scenario is how to encourage the departments of health to use these tools in their processes.
yeah, but this is in a very, very hostile environment.
A bit like South Africa, perhaps? Maybe in the processed meat industry?
So we already seeing a big problem with strikes and everything, but it's unfortunately we don't have enough information, but it may be that the approach in this scenario was not correct in the first place. So I wouldn't advise for the EHP to go alone back in that scenario. I would advise for higher management to start getting involved, and perhaps their approach can start with everything good the community got right.
Absolutely.
And then from there on, start talking around what needs to be done to improve on what they currently have. Share some factual stats in terms of maybe cases that in the local clinic, because this obviously was a lot of food facilities that were closed down in a single community. Yeah. Share some facts in terms of how it's been harming their community, and also then approach them in the sense of wanting to know what the department can do to assist, because I think that's where we have a big disconnect.
Absolutely.
As regulators, you only say, here's the regulation. In this particular case, it's the new regulation, but what did you do to ensure that what new regulation was understood by all the stakeholders, instead of just coming in and saying you do not comply, you do not comply.
Absolutely, I agree. Okay, so in the scenario, we've got the new regulation, we've got strikes, we've got the community up in arms. How can we diffuse the situation, and how could we use some of these principles that we've learned? Now, what's very interesting is the FDA actually spoke about a scenario like that when we were on training. And they had one particular region where they have a little bit of sort of flexibility in policy, but all they did was make a big deal about the restaurants that were doing the right thing. Same thing, they'd been only focusing on the guys that were, not conforming. And if you think about it, those are the ones that land up in the newspaper. The mouse in the bakery. And those are the things that we read about. But what if we had to actually focus on the ones that are doing the right things and make a big deal and again promote that to the community rather than just focusing on the negative? Because what it does then is you've got peer pressure. And that peer pressure is very real, and it works even when we're big, and it can then, have a knock-on effect. So, yeah, go for it. Good.
Thank you. I'd actually like to take that discussion a little bit further about communities. As happens when something like this happens, there's been a backwash, for instance, on the pig producers, and people who could no longer supply because factories have been closed down for a while. They supplied other outlets that had been supplied by smallholders, so you had that backwash, and the smallholders, for example, basically lost
their
livelihoods. When we come to the regulators, rebuilding that confidence so that there's even an understanding becomes very important, and that goes right down to community level. And throughout this entire day, we have been talking about enterprise as company. We must extend, separate audience perhaps, but extend that discussion to community level.
Absolutely.
And what it will take to get to enterprise level, and look at the impact of something like this at community and address that, including with the regulators. And there are several departments involved, which is part of the challenge. It's also being addressed, but not in a focused way as could be over here.
Sounds very interesting, because I agree. I think in terms of economic empowerment, it's at the community level enablement. You're right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so we wanted you to leave with a couple of practical situations that we would like you to try. We would like you to try. Before you leave, I want you to do one last thing. And this is quite important because this is actually, again, a psychological principle for engagement and commitment. On the back of your evaluation form, I want you to sign your personal commitment to making a difference. Now, don't sign if you don't mean it. I want you to think about this. Do you really think that you can make a difference where you are at? Then I want you to write the words, I hereby commit to a positive food safety culture in my company. And I want you to sign your name, and I want you to put today's date. Because I don't want you to go away from here thinking, gee, that was interesting, and nothing changes tomorrow. I want us to start changing. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your input. Okay. That one used. Here we go. There we go. All yours. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your feedback. Please let us know if there's something we can do differently. Watch the website, foodsafetyculture.co.za. We'll update all the presentations. You'll be able to go on and get this information. Please won't you share your feedback in terms of how we could do it better. Anything else we can assist with in terms of information, we'd love to hear from you. Travel safely and go out there and make a difference. Thanks.